Well, here we are. We made it to 2018. Can you believe that?
And did anybody think that we'd still be here?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure myself. Wasn't quite sure myself. So thanks for coming. I really enjoy seeing all your faces and forgetting half your names because I'm bad about that. But I do kind of recognize all your energy and appreciate you being here. Today, well, let me just sort of recap what we've been doing. I have too many pockets. Uh, we, we've had quite a bit of interest in the whole idea of the four quadrants in the last year and a half. And so we did a lot of work with just going through all of them and explaining them and trying to get a feel for all of them. And then this year, I thought it would be nice to kind of get more practical with them in terms of like, how do you use the four quadrants when you're really out of whack? So I came up with the title, How to Get Your Whack Back When You're Out of It, which I thought was very clever. That was like our first one. And then the next one, we talked about, we just kind of got caught in the lover quadrant because that seems to be a lot of where we get out of whack. A lot of us get out of whack. So we spent about 3 sessions on the lover quadrant. And so today I decided that, we talk about warrior quadrant. And so let's start. A little bit of if Marty's here, she usually asks me to do a quick review of the quadrants, just in case. And we have people who aren't familiar. The 4 quadrants, basically we're talking about 4 energies or 4 functions in the human being. And they tend to be on poles, dialectic poles, not exactly opposites, but they're kind of opposite. So at the top is the sovereign, which is the being function. They're based on functions, but in the history of developing this as a tactic to use or a framework to use for personal growth and helping other people, it had a heavy Jungian influence, and Jung was way into archetypes. And archetypes were these kind of quintessential sort of examples of a collection of energy that seemed to be universal. So like an example of something. And so the sovereign, the archetype for being would be the sovereign or the king or queen. Because for centuries we just had people ruling over other people, and the king and the queen had a certain sort of sense about them, certain set of responsibilities. And so it's helpful to have that symbol of that function so that we can kind of more easily relate to it. So if you're in the sovereign quadrant, basically that's the part of you that is in charge of your life, the part of you that really rules your life. And in order to rule your life, you need to know certain things. You need to know what your kingdom is, how far it goes, and what's the limit of it. You need to know what you're about. What is the theme of your kingdom, or the characteristics of your kingdom? You need to be able to have access to resources, and usually resources that are beyond you. So the sovereign is the seat of your spirituality or your ideology, if you don't like the idea of spirituality or supernatural connection. Or your connection to God, basically, if that makes more sense to you. That's the part of you that really connects the most and has their identity tied to something larger than yourself. Okay, so the sovereign is the seat of blessing, prosperity, self-knowledge, wisdom, that kind of thing. On the other end of the pole is warrior. And that represents the doing function. So any part of you that takes action, that sets limits, that fights for something, that stands for something, that declares something, that draws lines, that, executes, that's the warrior quadrant. Over here we have the feeling function, which is lover. That has to do with emotions and relationships and big-heartedness and inclusion and emotional stuff. Okay. And then over here we have the thinking function, and the archetype for that is the magician. And these are archaic names basically, but Jung was a student of ancient civilizations and the stories that they told. And he believed that these stories seem to have a universal quality to them, and these characters seem to be very universal in all of those stories. So that must reflect something about humanity. So that's why we use archetypes. So today, anybody have any question about any of these? Or are you just like, come on, get over it? Every time we have to have this. Okay, we're going to talk about lover. Or no, we're going to talk about warrior. That's even a hard word for me to say, warrior. And I have a little bit of, I don't know, mixed feelings about talking about warrior. And so it's a long family tradition in my family. One of the ways I stay connected to my mother after she's gone is to apologize for everything I'm about to offer. She did this. She did this for every meal. Every meal, she would say, "Well, the roast is a little tough, but here it is." And of course, it'd be wonderful, or I think I burnt the chicken or something. She had to declare her deficiencies before every meal, and so But I do sort of feel like you need a warning, because sometimes when you speak about something, people get the idea that you really know what you're talking about and that you have some sort of mastery in that arena, some sort of authority. Well, I know a lot about warrior, but I just have to tell you, it's my weakest part. And I don't like being that weak. I don't like feeling deficient, and I don't want you to think that I've got it all handled. And it's a little bit of a secret, because some of you, I'm real mouthy. I can be really mouthy, and I can talk a good game. And I can say things strongly and have big opinions and, be sort of bombastic. But the truth is that I'm just practicing for when I might actually have a functional warrior, or one that I feel good about. So that's just the disclosure for today. So what we're going to do about this morning, how it's going to run, is we want to talk about, I think you're pretty settled in what the warrior quadrant is, right? Is anybody confused, or does anybody need clarification, just theoretically? Okay. But we want to know, how do we know when what would a healthy warrior feel like? What would a healthy warrior look like? How would that feel when my warrior part of me is actually doing well? Well, how would I know? How would that look and feel? And maybe we won't get there till we talk about how it feels when you're out of whack, when you're not functioning very well. So we'll discuss that. Any input from you would be welcome. And then I have a little questionnaire, which I found online. It's not exactly a warrior questionnaire, but in my profession for the last 40 years maybe, we've talked about assertiveness. And there's a lot of literature around assertiveness and a lot of training around assertiveness. And it kind of encapsulates, how to behave assertively versus all these other things that the warrior sometimes can be. So it's an assertiveness questionnaire. Take you back to the 80s. And then, if we have time, we'll talk about how to help your warrior when it's a little bit out of whack, or how to use your warrior to help the rest of you. Because, we'll just see how y'all are doing. Maybe you're a better warrior than I am, and then we can just play cards and go home. Because I don't have anything to tell you. Okay, so let's first talk about what would it be like if your warrior is out of whack? So think about this. Think about it and take a stab at it. If you're out of whack in your warrior, what would we see? How would you feel?
Combative.
Oh, you could be combative, yes.
Stuck.
Ooh, my favorite.
I think overpowering.
Yeah, you could be like overbearing.
Maybe just too busy without a lot of.
Oh yeah, over busy.
Confused.
Doormat.
You could be confused, yep. You could be being a doormat. Other people are running over you. How would it feel?
Wait, when you're warrior, so we're going different extremes.
Either way,
So
either way, if you're out of whack, what would it be like?
Hopelessness?
Yeah, you could feel hopeless, which is close to powerless, right? Which is related to victim-y shit. No, victim mentality. Victim mentality.
I'm going to use that.
Victim-y. Think about feeling. How would you feel if your warrior's out of whack? Powerless, hopeless, anything else? Tentative. Angry.
Kind of like a loose cannon.
Yeah, so volatile or bombastic, or what should we call that? Loose cannon. We'll just call it loose cannon.
I think you kind of have to be cut off from your feelings a little bit, just because. I don't know. For me, that's what fuels any kind of, which I have almost none, warrior action is connection with feelings.
Is numb.
So
Would
yeah, numb.
would numb.
Oh, okay, yeah, numb, totally. So the opposite of that would be
Maybe loose cannon. Yeah, agitated.
yeah, agitated.
Agitated, crabby.
Yes.
I know these words.
Controlling.
Yeah, controlling,
Controlling.
demanding. Back to these: powerless, agitated, crabby. Here's my other favorite one: frustrated.
Okay, then how about very impatient?
Yeah, patient, impatient, impulsive.
Maybe unappreciated. I keep seeing the person who does everything while everyone's sitting around talking.
Resentful.
Yeah, resentful.
And, yes, I guess that's what it is.
Detached?
Oh, very.
Sounds like you guys know these. Detached, you said?
Yeah.
Detached. Anything else, or are you depressed now? I'm a little bit depressed.
It's not on there.
Oh, defensive. That's a good one.
Depressed isn't on there, you better put it.
Yeah, depressed is often a function of a non-functioning warrior. Often.
What was it?
Depressed.
Oh.
Yeah, because basically you've collapsed.
And I want to say too, we talked about disconnection from the lover side, but there's disconnection from the magician side too. It's kind of a mindless set of doing because you're just out there doing without being informed about what you're doing and why.
Like busy work.
Yeah, it's
kind of
just
like
busy just to stay busy, but mindlessly.
Yeah.
mindless busyness.
Impotent
Non,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting
Right?
stuff
With
done.
no
Non-
direction.
Getting stuff done, but it
Yes,
might not be
yes.
worth their.
Yes,
Keep them
unintentional
busy.
business.
it's unintentional, they are unintentional.
Yeah.
They can be
Exactly.
Yeah.
very
In-
unintentional.
Intention. Ah. Oh. Impotent, unintentional busyness. So that's busyness. That's different from just being, loading up your schedule and just working yourself to death
With
Very,
purpose.
very
with purpose.
You can
Yeah.
do it without any purpose.
Yeah.
right.
But they're both warrior kind of things.
A passive aggressive that kind of sits in. It's like a warrior would want to be getting stuff done, and if a warrior were really getting frustrated or not knowing how to get something done, or might go in that place.
Another one of my favorites.
Go where?
That passive aggressive space.
Be aggressive, passive, aggressive. That's my favorite cheer. Or manipulative.
Yeah, yeah.
All
Yes.
manipulation is it's one way to do the warrior, get what you want. Okay, so anything else you just got to get up here. That's just because you can see it's interesting in a way, these kinds of out of whack, and the whole purpose of trying to figure out how to get your whack back and how to figure out what your whack is, whatever I'm trying to say, what whack or what healthiness is that it's good to have these distinctions, because to feel just generally bad and depressed doesn't help very much. But if you're feeling powerless and angry and irritable and resentful and hopeless and all, then you've got a whole lot of beliefs or thought. That's a lot to work with then, if you know what these distinctions are. And the fact that they're in the warrior quadrant also gives you a clue then, because what do warriors do? They do things. So it sort of lends itself to what can I do if I'm feeling angry, hopeless, whatever. Angry, victim-y, crabby, agitated, hopeless, and confused. All of those things, if they're connected to warrior, might help you kind of go, maybe I'm disconnected from, maybe if I could hook up or get my warrior going, it would help with some of these things. And it's one of the interesting things about depression in particular, or defeatedness. Doing anything, doing one thing, getting up and doing something, sometimes will get you moving again in the other arenas. So let that be a lesson to you, I guess. Just a little. So then, yeah.
Maybe I'm jumping ahead. So, in the deflated warrior, a lot of times it could be a boundary issue, right? You're not setting boundaries for yourself, and is that?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean,
But that's just
boundaries, borders of the kingdom. That's kind of that's right in the warrior's realm. So if you're feeling resentful because you're working on someone's behalf, or you're not taking care of yourself because you're busy out there taking care of everybody else, then that's a clue that maybe if you set some limits, set some boundaries, that you would be able to restore yourself to a better way of being. So, yeah. Anything else? Okay. So then, that's the unhealthy. That's how and we all recognize this. We've all been there. I found this little I really can't do more than one thing at a time. Can't talk and do anything else. It's really, I really wish I could do that. It's just it's getting worse all the time. So I'm going to pass out this little questionnaire, and so that you might be able to see your particular style of warrior, I guess. I don't want you to get too hooked on it or too upset about it or too whacked out about it, because it's just a questionnaire somebody put together around assertiveness. But I thought it was interesting because they don't just talk about, are you assertive or are you not assertive? There's like different types, different styles of issues here. So I'm going to pause this and let you guys work on that. My instructions are just basically, if it's pretty straightforward. Oh, I'll wait till it gets passed out.
And there are pens in the center there if anybody needs one.
I like that it's rather true and
Rather true or rather false.
true
Yeah.
and false.
Can't make money.
I like that.
If you think you figured out how to do this, go ahead and do it. But and I think it came from South Africa or the UK or something. That's why it's rather true or rather false. I think.
Phyllis, do you have any more?
Oh yeah. I just didn't dig them all out. Oh, perfect.
Or two.
Yeah, one for Ted's
Yeah, I.
sacrificial.
Thanks.
Oh, okay, great. And don't get too hung up on, well, sometimes I'm this in this situation, and sometimes I'm that in that situation. Just try to, yeah, in general. So put an X if it's rather true, or in the other box if it's rather false. Oh, you want to copy it?
I don't want to mark on it. 'Cause I wanna-
Kathy, do you guys have a copy machine?
It's okay. No. I'm just saying.
Hey, Phil.
We'll
Just
post.
post the PDF to the website.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you're not in the Facebook group, you can just email me or something. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to do it then the other way to see what the falses came out to be,
What the falses came out to be? Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like in
I
other
mean,
words, it should be me.
I got it online, so we don't know the metrics of it and the validity and reliability and all that jazz that I'm supposed to care about. It's just a little thing. So don't take it too seriously. And so raise your hand if you're a little depressed about these, about your results, or you feel a little critical, or you're not surprised. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Gosh, I'm so manipulative. I'm really grossed out, kind of.
Well, the reason, so here's mine, just in case. I thought mine was pretty embarrassing. Although I did get the highest score on harmonious assertiveness. But flight or passivity, really, passive is my unhealthy warrior. I only have 1 point in aggressiveness and 4 points in manipulativeness.
4 and manipulative? Wow.
Oh, sorry, no, that's not -1. That's a 1. So I'm not surprised either. I'm a 9, so of course passive is, and passive aggressive I thought is on the right. So passive aggression. But I like the only reason I really like this is not to kind of shame you or tell you all the things you need to improve on. But basically these 4, and there are many, are ways that we do our warrior. It's all of this is warrior stuff. And so how we get things done, how we manage our lives on the practical level, how we execute our lives, we do it in many different ways. So all the unhealthy stuff that warrior has that we can suffer from is up there too, but it is a way of doing things. So there are some advantages in being aggressive. There are some situations in which you need to really be aggressive, ruthless, fierce, right? Right? I mean, yeah, there might be some situations. What? Yeah, life or death.
Your kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the mama bear, the defender of something, of anything. If you're playing sports, you need to be aggressive or you're not going to win, right? So if you're on a team, most of us experience healthy aggression in those ways. When you're doing sports or you're doing something that's not life or death, then you have a chance to become very aggressive and feel the energy of that aggression moving through you in a healthy way or in a safe environment. But if we are using aggression in the workplace, say, sometimes that's even appropriate, but for the most part, aggression is a less than favorable way to do things. You're just going to shoot yourself in the foot or make it hard for other people or defeat your purpose if you're too aggressive on something. But it is a way that the warrior will act sometimes. Being passive, running away, or freezing, that is a thing that you do. Sometimes that's a choice that you make or a choice that your body makes anyway. Sometimes to do nothing is very effective. And if you've perfected that strategy, like some of us have, we do it for a reason. We try these things out when we're growing up. We try these strategies out. And we figure out which ones work for us and which ones suit us. And it may not be terribly healthy, but it's our style, it's our way that we get things done. And if it's not working, then we can decide, are there other options and how can I choose some other options, right? So it's interesting also to look at people that you've been in relationship with or organizations you've been in and see their warrior style. We were in a church where the manipulation factor, huge. And the aggression would come out in play. So that was nasty. That was icky. That felt really, really bad.
In play, like as in joking?
When we would do play. So I'll tell you the story. So we were in leadership, of course, in this church. And so at Christmas time in particular, they would set up all these games, all these fun games, and they were super competitive. So everybody was competing against everybody else. And it was supposed to be play, but it was ruthless. It was cutthroat, and and I didn't appreciate that at all. But that was fun for him. Being aggressive was fun. And but most of the time it was all manipulation, leadership by manipulation and backhanded aggression. That's just not really good leadership. So I just thought I'd never seen anybody so masterful at it before. It was a fascinating study. So any other?
So I have a funny thing that just happened. Like it literally just happened.
Oh.
And this is the question I kind of have in general. Maybe some of you guys struggle with this. Is that sometimes the direct ask or something feels like manipulation, even though it's not. Like in my head, in my little twistedness.
Okay.
So I get on here that the words were different. But so this person just brought 30 boxes of cereal to the refuge, and which is super cool. It was awesome. And so, but as we're talking, I was like, well, you know what, we would love, like, your church to do more. Like, here's some things that we need. And as I'm saying it, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't feel guilty at all. And I didn't all the way, but in that moment, like just being super direct and going, the cereal's great, thank you, but what we really need is this. And just saying it in a kind way. And I was just thinking in this moment, like, and I do kind of know how to do that little thing. And I don't want to feel bad. That was not manipulating.
That was
in a way.
harmonious assertiveness.
But why does it feel manipulating somehow? Maybe it's some of the ways these were worded too. Yeah. About, I don't know, just that little
I think that's a good, well, I mean, what do you guys think? Why does it feel manipulative?
Because you're asking for your needs.
You're asking for what you want.
But why
And that
is it
shouldn't
weird?
feel right.
But it does.
It's because how dare you? It's like, oh, how
Who
could
do you
you
think
ask
you
for
are?
Yeah.
You have the audacity, to.
It's from a culture of need shaming.
Yeah, need shaming. Oh. Ooh, I'm going to write that down.
You may have empathized with her to a point of, here they did this really nice thing. 30 boxes of cereal is not nothing. Here they did this really nice thing, and I'm almost like not appreciative, even though I said I was. It's almost like, well, yeah, but what else can you do for me? So you may have just had the empathy. Are you a 2?
Imagine that.
Busted. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. Like if you're attuned to what the other person is feeling and what their motives are and what they want, maybe you're attuned to the fact that they feel really proud that they did this thing and that they really need to be thanked and they need to be appreciated. And you realize that you don't appreciate it as much as they need to be appreciated. So your actual appreciation is maybe like this. Their need for appreciation is up to here. So you've got this gap. So how can I not totally pimp myself out and over-appreciate when the truth is that this is great, but if you're interested in really helping, which, so it gets that whole empathy business gets involved because you tune into what the other person wants. And you don't want to offend somebody. You don't want to be aggressive and say, well, thanks. If you really want to help, sarcastic or sideways or backhanded. If you really wanted to help, here's a list and hope you come next time or something. That would be aggressive.
If I'm really honest, I'm pissed at the church all the time. And so, to me, because I know in a snap, they could take care of so many needs. Like, with just one moment, they could go like this and take care of a need. If every person just did one small thing. So that's why. And, she's great. And
yeah, it's not about her
No.
necessarily.
I just noticed in the moment that when I do that thing,
yeah,
that I don't want to feel, I was honest. I was truthful. I was clear. I was all those things, and I don't want to leave feeling bad about that.
Yeah.
And just go, I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I was really thankful, actually. It'll be great. But I do want them to know that there's more that we need if they really want to do something, and she does.
Yeah.
But the feeling afterwards.
Yeah, you want to be able to be harmoniously assertive without feeling guilty. And this feeling of guilt or the feeling of anxiety for breaking the rules or doing something formally judged outrageous or being, whatever, that leaves you with the feeling when you make a different choice, when you break your rules, then it costs you something in the shifting of it for a long, long time. I mean, I don't know if you'll ever not feel guilty for that. It would be nice to just be able to be harmoniously assertive and let it go, let it lie, no matter how well it goes. Because sometimes if you're harmoniously assertive, it's not going to go well for you. And the person might get really upset. Or it might be an ugly transaction, or they might get really defensive. And so then it costs you a lot of emotional energy to have done what you needed to do in that moment. But it's how we get in this predicament to begin with. So passivity, if that's that's my style, then in that situation, I might have not either felt that thing like this would be an opportunity maybe to let them know what we would really, and I see that your group wants to help. We would love to have your help. If you're interested in helping us more, here's some things that you could do. I might not even have that thought. I'd be so caught up in this person's need for whatever I assume they need in the moment, and thank you, and not mention it, because I would be overstepping my comfort zone, and that would make me feel exactly how you're feeling, or more so, because I broke my old rules. So anticipating the cost of asserting yourself and deciding it's not worth it. We made those choices when we were kids, from learning, trying different things out, and it didn't go well for us. So we our nervous system kind of goes, guess we won't do that again. And then we find these sideways ways of getting our agenda done, if possible. And then if not, we find ways to try to be okay without the thing that we needed, or without taking action. Does that make sense? So that's a really good example of why we don't execute in a healthy way, because we didn't learn that pays off, and we paid harsher consequences for whatever reason. And so we just adapt, and we kind of tweak ourselves, and that's how we get unhealthy styles of action.
Is part of healthy warrior asking?
Yes. So
that's all I was going to say. Just in that situation that you just described, my tendency is like yours, to talk first and over empathize. And when I catch myself, it probably translates in the manipulation quadrant, but when I pause and hold back and ask, like, what are you asking? What do you want to do? Then it slows me down in that either aggressive or snarky or smothering thing that I do, or that
yeah,
thing that I do.
Schmoozy.
But-
It's schmoozy.
To take a step back. So it makes me wonder if, because part of it does feel a little bit more like I'm playing a card, or I'm holding my cards back, which is in the manipulative quadrant. But isn't there a healthy place for asking?
Oh yeah. So let's shift then to so if we're out of whack, if we're not happy with our style, whatever, then what can we do? How can we help? How can we help our warrior when our warrior's out of whack? Well, my first inclination is to try to get help from the other quadrants. So if you know your warrior is out of whack, then how can we get help from the other parts of us? So your warrior's out of whack, you're feeling helpless, hopeless, you're feeling shame, you're feeling collapsed, you're feeling, negative or deflated in some way. You can get help from your healthy lover, by offering compassion. Oh, this is a crappy way to feel. I'm really sorry. Or all of the things that we do with self-compassion is to acknowledge and validate the feeling and come under and support. So from the lover quadrant, if you're feeling deflated in your warrior, and you don't have to keep all these things straight, it's just a way to look at it. But if you're feeling deflated, I don't know about you, but what I usually do is kind of kick myself in the rear and just say, or shame myself, or use something unhealthy that comes along and says, well, see, you're always like this. It always turns out like this. If you'd have done this, this, and this, it would have been okay. But no, you have to be la da da da, and you'll never get anywhere. And so bringing the critic online is one of our very favorite things to do, which comes from which quadrant? Critic comes from which quadrant? The magician, unhealthy magician. And it's meant to kind of give you the kick in the butt, but most of the time it just reinforces the collapse. So you could try something else. You could bring self-compassion, which is one of the best things to do because it kind of levels the playing field. It speaks to the emotions. And then once you breathe through your heart a little bit, you can stop. You can kind of get clearer to see something else. Of course, you can use the healthy magician to come up with ideas. What could we do instead? What's the problem here? Healthy analysis. But the best way, I think, to get your warrior back to whack is to see if you can get into your sovereign, because symbolically, the warrior is there to implement and serve the sovereign. The warrior is a servant. The warrior is an implementer. And so if the sovereign is in whack, and we'll have to talk about that later on this spring, and fully functional, then it empowers the warrior. It helps the warrior be focused on the task and it empowers the warrior because sovereign is in touch with resources and in touch with energy and blessing and prosperity. So when sovereign is fully functional, then it automatically empowers the warrior. And it kind of sets focus. Because sometimes if warrior's out doing too many things, if we're scattered and just doing busy things, to get your sovereign online kind of helps you. Well, I'm about this and not about that, so let's drop that and let's do this instead, kind of. So it helps to sift and helps you to focus on behavior that's really going to move you in a whole direction rather than being scattered in 25 different directions that feel kind of impotent. So that's how sovereign can help a out of whack warrior. And of course, magician, healthy magician, I'll just restate that, is to come up with ideas. I just want to suggest, however, that you use the first two first. Start with self-compassion, see if you can get into some activity to help you connect with who you really are and what you know about your true self. Because we've had a lot of magician warrior stuff in our society and in our culture. We're big warrior magicians, so we think things up and we do them. That's entrepreneurialism. That's invention. It's kind of how it's supposed to work. If you have a healthy magician, you think up ideas and you just do them.
It's also mansplaining.
Could be mansplaining. Yeah, could be mansplaining. Yeah, yeah. But we can be so unhealthy if we do that all the time, and we're missing the energy from the other two. Then it's our go-to maneuver, and then for some of us, like myself in particular, that unhealthy magician, that critic that overanalyzes, the one that gathers so much information, but it's not rooted in who I really am, that it just makes me more passive, more defeated, full of shame, and more stuck. So I would say a lot of my growth in the last 10 or 15 years has been to try to get out of this unhealthy magician warrior thing to help my warrior and come up with some other things. And so, does that make sense? It's just a little trick. You don't have to do that, and don't get confused, please, with that, because it's a lot of thinking. Is that really, how do I get in touch with my warrior again? How do I get in touch with this again? And maybe I should do X. You can get lost in over analyzing that stuff. But your question was, oh, yes. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in how do we help our warrior is to think about some actual tools or actions that work. And so one of the things that I learned in my coaching program was the idea of speech acts. Speech acts. And I might have to do a whole thing on speech acts. But it's in the quadrant of warrior because it's a way that you can communicate in such a way that's effective and gets things moving and gets things done. And so asking is one of the speech acts that's most effective. Some of them are, so that's a request, just a flat out request. A promise is another speech act. A distinction, yes. A declaration, an assertion, and an assessment. I might talk about this next time, actually, in the warrior quadrant. It's just one way we can use communication to help clarify, to give the warrior some kind of better marching orders. Because a lot of times if we don't know what to do, if we find ourselves manipulating people, or we're angry, or we're confused, and we want to take action, or we're frustrated, we want to do something, but we don't know what to do, and the only thing we can do is communicate, then there's some very potent types of speech that we can use that help clarify things, limit things, state things clearly, put distinctions on, understand things clearly, and help to distinguish between a fact and an opinion. So one thing, yes, that you can do to help a warrior is just to learn how to communicate more effectively, and try to ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to do here? What am I trying to accomplish? And how am I doing it? And what would be a more effective way to do it? Well, no one teaches us actually how to make a request very well. So, would you please do X by in the next couple of weeks, or by the end of the week? Could you please do X and give it a time limit? So you're asking nicely, you're stating it clearly, and you're letting someone know when you'd like to have it done. They can always say no, or they can always step into a negotiation with you, but at least you've said it. Instead of, how come they're never doing that? Why do they always leave that thing undone? Or they never pick up their clothes, or they're always... Instead of asking, could you please pick up your towel when you take a shower, and don't leave it on the floor as soon as you're done taking a shower.
A lot of times adding the why helps, I think, bring clarity too. It's not saying just what you want, but why.
Yeah.
And then the other person has more understanding of why, what you're asking.
Yeah. Yeah. So as clear as you can be about your communication, and doing it straight instead of around the bend. Amy.
That reminds me a lot of the NVC style.
Oh, nonviolent communication?
Yeah. The state your needs, and then you ask if you're perceiving their needs correctly, and then you ask for, like you just said. But I think it's really important to state your needs.
Yeah.
And be in touch with that yourself.
Yeah, I think it's really important to state your needs, and also to state your judgments. This is a really important thing, because we don't always make a distinction between an assessment and an assertion, a fact or an opinion or a judgment. And so we often count our judgments as facts. So I'm trying to think of an example.
Clothes should not be left on the floor. I mean, that's a judgment.
Anybody who leaves clothes on the floor is lazy.
Yeah.
No one should leave clothes on the floor. Yeah. Clothes on the floor means that you're sloppy. Clothes should never be left on the floor because it's bad for the clothes. You could have all kinds of judgment. Anybody who does, you've got any number of judgments that could be attached to the fact, the assertion that there are clothes on the floor. If you just say, I noticed your towel was on the floor at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after you took a shower at 8 in the morning.
Every day.
I'm finally bringing it up now.
Yeah. That's a little on the edge. I don't know what that is about that. It might actually be true. But an assertion is a verifiable fact. It's something that you saw, something you witnessed, something that you could document, something that actually happened in real time. So, yes, maybe it was every day. Maybe you kept a chart. You know, maybe you videoed every day. Maybe it was on the nanny cam or whatever.
It's probably better to keep it short, right? To focus
Yeah.
on what just happened.
Yeah, it's always better, always better. But, you know, you start with the assertion. I noticed your towel was on the floor. My judgment is that you're just not thinking. I could be wrong, but my judgment is whatever your judgments are, that you're not thinking. My judgment is that you don't care a whit about me. My judgment is you don't care how that stupid towel smells after 4 hours on the floor, wet, crumpled up. My judgment is that that people who do that are inconsiderate. My judgment is if you start to own what your judgments are, then you learn a lot of things about yourself and why you're saying those things. So,
And it's probably less about the towel on the floor, the fact, and more about your meaning making
yeah,
of another person's intention or motivation or something like that. That is really the issue that's in front of you that
Yeah.
you're trying to address.
Well, one thing I have problems with assertions is that a lot of times I'll feel like that towel has been on the floor forever, and maybe it's just been over the past couple of weeks, but in my mind, it's a freaking fact.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and that you better not argue with that.
yeah,
And so then if somebody goes, well, that's not actually true, then I could go, oh, I remembered that differently. You know?
yeah, yeah. And so then that's kind of a conversation ender at that point. But now I'm frustrated because we're arguing about that rather than the fact that it bothers me that the towel's on the floor.
Right.
Yeah. So, and some manipulative people will do that. They'll argue with you the facts or your perception of the facts instead of,
You feel like you're crazy.
yeah, we call that what? Gaslighting. Or maybe they do just see things differently. So, so what else? What else can we do to help our poor warrior?
The thought that comes to mind for me because when my warrior is healthy, I have to be prepared to lose relationship. And so, and that's like, my lover is crazy.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really hard.
Yeah.
And so out of everything that I've probably learned in this last couple of years, it's just, and that's where you have to access sovereign.
Yeah.
And like really get down into that, I kind of did all those things and still sort of ended up in a weird scene. And so just learning how to accept that. And as a two codependent, I could go on and on, wanting to kind of make it better. And my warrior has to access the sovereign. Because otherwise, I'll just default to the other thing, and then all that work was for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, accepting that has been really seriously one of the hardest things for me. Because somehow, and this is where going a little bit to the manipulation, like normally I could make things work sometimes through unhealthy skills. And then when I apply healthy ones, the consequence sometimes in relationship is other people don't play in the same way.
Yeah.
And so really accepting that has been really hard, but really good. And the only way that I have peace is because of sovereign.
Yeah.
And so, like, without that sort of, like, rootedness, like, you know, down deep, something more solid, I can feel it, you know, just want to slip right back into the old way. So
Yeah.
I think that's what I like about what you're saying.
Yeah.
You really need the other ones. And head will not do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It will not do it.
Well, it can help you if, at the very least, if you're not acting, and I do this a lot in my own life.
Frozen or stuck.
If you're frozen or stuck, you're not acting, then the first place I end up going is to shame. And then label it something. You're lazy, or you're dumb because you don't know what to do, or you go to that critic, rather than step up and ask myself, I'm probably not acting for some reason. What are some of the reasons that I might not be acting? And how are they tied to fear? Or how are they tied to something? So usually it's, what am I afraid of? And so you did a really nice job of talking about the fears, and the big fear for people who value relationship is, I might lose relationship. I might lose something. And that's a big value that you might have. So you may decide that it's not worth it. You may decide that I should test this relationship, and take action and just see if this relationship will end if I assert myself or not. Or you might know that's going to be the end of it, and I need this person for this reason. So you do a little bit of analysis around, what am I afraid of? Or I'm afraid, a lot of mine, if I don't confront somebody, or if I don't take action that's in a relationship kind of a thing, I get afraid of losing the relationship, but I also get afraid of them being really good at warrioring, and I really suck at warrioring. So getting into an argument where I'm going to feel stupid and freeze. I don't want that. I don't want to be embarrassed in that way. So that fuels a lot of my passivity. Is weak warrior sort of reinforces weak warrior, and so I might get really, really mad, but I have no confidence in a fight. And I've told you all that story about the fight like a chicken thing, right? So I was in a big conflict with a coworker, and she was really good at arguing, and was not good at communicating. Was willing to be aggressive, put it that way. Willing to be aggressive. I was not willing, nor was I skilled. And so I was afraid that if we got into a fight, that she would be really articulate. And she did. She just called me to task. She threw judgments at me. She shamed the crap out of me. She reinvented history. She made all kinds of judgments against me in a public setting. And I just froze and fell into a puddle of tears. And so I kind of knew that she was really good at that. And then I had to negotiate with her down the line. And so I had this encounter with this person who intuited that I was in a relational problem at work. And he said, well, you have to fight. And I was like, I got nothing. I'm not a fighter. I can't fight. And this person didn't speak English terribly well, so I was trying to communicate. I said, well, in a fight, she's like a lion, and I'm like a chicken. And he said this life-changing thing to me, which is a principle of the 4 quadrants, which is everybody's got warrior. Even chickens, he said, even a chicken knows how to fight for her chicks. So you have to fight like a chicken if you have to, basically, is what he said. So for your soul, because this is an important thing. Like, he discerned more than I did that what was at stake here was some piece of my soul that I was completely undone, unraveled, and I was suffering, and I was about to do damage to myself by being passive, ineffective, and emotional. And so when he said, you have to fight your way, basically, then it gave me some way to think about what is it that I can do, that I'm capable of doing to stand up for myself in this situation. So I found a way to say no, and I found a way to say, here's what I'm willing to do, and here's what I'm not willing to do. And I took responsibility for some things I thought that she was frustrated with. And I decided not to confront her about her horrible behavior, because I knew that was going to get me nowhere. And I was going to have to live with her for the next 5 years. I was going to have to be in business with her for the next 5 years. It literally happened as the lease, 2 months after the lease had been signed. So I had 5 years with this person. And so I was counting the costs, and I was calculating what should I be doing here. And I think I correctly assessed my capabilities, my weaknesses, if you want to call them that, my skills, and my willingness to show up and draw the line. So anybody who maybe filmed that whole series of events, we could analyze it and say, well, you could have done this, or you should have done that, or that was really ineffective, or she got away with this, or she got away with that. Might be true, but I think that it enabled me to correctly assess what I was capable of and what my own soul, who knows who I am, was willing to do in a really challenging situation in which I felt really one down. And so it set me up for some major confrontations later on, where I just was like, I don't like this, I'm being accused of something, I'm being confronted about something that I did. And so I just decided, yeah, that's what I did. Here's why I did it.
And one of your biggest moments was to just simply say, I decline your offer.
Yeah. Well, with her, yeah, I just was, because she was being really manipulative, and she it was about offices. Yeah, it was about offices. She decided she had to have the biggest office at first, and I'm like, fine, I'll have the little smaller corner office, which I adored, I loved. And then later she decided that since she was the senior partner and superior to me, that she really needed the best office, and the corner office was clearly the best office. And so she wanted to trade offices with me, and if I didn't want to do that, that I should pay more for that office because it's clearly the best office. So
even though you'd already negotiated.
Even though we'd already negotiated, even though I was paying the same, yeah, I was paying the same as she was for a smaller office. She wanted me to pay more because it was a better office, and she decided these things. Anyway, so my.
It's only better because that was your office.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would love to just make a list of all the judgments against this person, because that would make me feel really good. But instead, the phrase that I came up with was, I'm going to decline your offer. I'm just going to, no, basically, no, I'm not moving, and I'm not paying more. So, and yeah, thanks for your offer, basically. And I was really surprised by how she just backed off, which bullies will often do that when you just stand up to them. What else? So counting the costs. So part of dealing with your warrior is recognizing that we all are using our warrior in some way. It may be effective, it may not be effective, but if we're passive, we have reasons for that. And we might be doing cost-benefit ratios, we might be weighing all kinds of things, we might be afraid, so you could deal with the fear, or you could just acknowledge, that's how I roll, and so I'm gonna do it intentionally. So ghosting is another, you've heard of ghosting, right? When you just drop out of somebody's life. You just kind of end the relationship without telling anybody, basically. You just go away. Those are negative ways, I guess, when you think about the ways that the warrior can act. It's either in a, I'm going to say positive or negative, but not morally positive or morally negative. It's more like overt and covert. So overt ways of acting would be to say, you're not my friend anymore. I'm done with this. you know, I'm over, I can't do this anymore. That would be an overt way of ending a relationship. Just deciding to end the relationship without telling them, so not responding to texts or phone calls or emails or just, you know, dropping out. That would be ghosting. So,
Unfriending them.
or unfriending them, yeah.
Or being too chicken to unfriend and you just hide.
You just hide them.
Yeah, that's even better. Hide the newsfeed.
I just hit about 20 people. Either way, I think that it's, yeah, I didn't unfriend you. I don't even know how to unfriend somebody for real. I don't even know how. Just unfollow.
My warrior.
Yeah. You've done good. My point is that don't get too hooked into what's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. I think it's important at the beginning to just value, just kind of assess and notice what you do and realize that there are reasons for it. And then you can get into that if you want to. If you really want to change it because it's costing you more than it's benefiting you, that's a good reason to change it. But you have to get into actually how you are with some acceptance and some grace before you can shift. In the early days of assertiveness training, we would just teach people, don't do this, do this. You got to set your boundaries. And so we were all everywhere around the world. We were setting boundaries, verbally usually, and it was unnecessarily offensive. It became I watched a lot of people become very aggressive unnecessarily, like they just went from passive to aggressive, and that means you didn't really own who you are. You just kind of went, this is the wrong behavior, this is the right behavior, I'm going to try to do the right behavior, and then screw yourself up to do things, and then all that guilt and all that angst would funnel the action or not fuel the action, and then you'd end up being aggressive. Does that make sense? So I'm going to draw a boundary here. You can't talk to me on Thursdays after 2 o'clock because it's really rude that you call me at 2 o'clock and you know that's when I do blah, blah, blah. That's how we used to, that very simplistic boundary setting thing.
But don't you think that's kind of like a first step?
It can be
Because
a first step.
You need to just set
Yeah.
a boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can, so
And then learn from there.
how to be more diplomatic. And I always tell the story of when I was at Sam's Club one day and I walked away from my cart and I left my purse. I've told this story before. My purse was in the cart and I walked away and then I lost track of where I put my cart. And because I couldn't see it, I believed that someone had stolen it. And so I needed help. So it was so breaking the rules to ask for help like that I was all energized, and I went up to the person and I said, somebody stole my purse. My cart is gone and I can't find my purse. Oh, well, is there someone who can help me? Well, I guess I could. You need to get on and I'm just uncharacteristically aggressive. Get on the thing because somebody's going to get out of here. And do you want the police here? Do you want this place to shut down? Like I just went nuts. And so and then finally I said, can I talk to the manager? And this poor person brought the manager to me and he was like, well, let's go back and look where you were. And I thought he was being very condescending to me and I did not like that one bit. But he helped me find my cart and my purse was right there. And so then I had to apologize to everybody. But yeah, when you're doing this, you can kind of I mostly just made a fool of myself more than anything. It was right in my cart. Yeah, nothing. But I couldn't believe what I was actually capable of doing. But that kind of, when you're stepping over your comfort zone in a way where in the moment you're like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to have to call the police. I don't want to have to get new drivers. I find my keys or call. It fueled my craziness and fear. Yeah.
Fear is really a lot of the underneath issue.
Yeah. So I went from, freeze to fight. I was ready to fight, and that was kind of silly. So, any other comments or things you want to say about helping get your warrior up to speed count the cost, use the other quadrants.
Another question I ask is, after I figure out the outcome I'm looking for and the potential cost or whatever of trying to get that outcome, I always ask how likely I am to succeed
Oh, that's a
in
good.
getting the outcome I'm going to go to war for. And if I don't think I'm going to succeed, then I have to ask, is it worth the confrontation anyway?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it might be.
yourself.
Yes. And when
Um,
you're
Yeah.
need to confront somebody, particularly very serious things like I've worked a lot with childhood sexual abuse or some kind of childhood abuse, and it's very therapeutic to in some way confront your abuser. And some people can do that. Most people, I think it's more beneficial if you do it symbolically in some way, because it gives you the satisfaction of taking a stand when you couldn't before, without having to deal with the likelihood that that person's going to validate, admit, and apologize. That's what that's the best case scenario, is if someone has abused you and you confront them, that they're like, oh yes, I did. They own it. They show remorse. They make a valid apology, or they offer restitution, and then there's some kind of resolution. But in cases of abuse, that rarely happens, because it takes a certain something for a person to act aggressively toward another human being, particularly a child. So those people, if they're willing to do that, they're not really capable of the kind of self-reflection, remorse, and maturity that it takes to face up to what they've done. And so your likelihood of being satisfied, having your best outcome, is low. So what should you do instead? Are there ways to do that get what your soul needs, what your soul is asking of you, regardless of the consequence? Or sometimes you just need to say it, and you're not going to get any satisfaction, but damn it, I had to say that. So there are a lot of people who are doing that right now. That the Me Too movement, I think, is one of them. People who were in the shadows for a long, long time, and finally were like, I'm going to say something now, and it's not going to go well for me. One of the women who had accused Roy Moore, I just saw this on social media, who had accused him, had her house torched yesterday. So, sometimes there are consequences, but in serious situations, it's better to just go, I can't betray myself anymore. So it's a warrior stance to say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't do this to myself anymore. Hiding or not speaking has done me damage. And I know myself well enough to discern this is what I need from myself at this point, and I am going to take the consequences, whatever they may be. That's an extreme example, but that's a good... when you get back in touch with your sovereign, then you can ask that question, and you might know. And so that part of you might say, it's not worth it right now. It's not going to cost you very much. You're not compromising your soul. Yeah, they shouldn't be doing that, but they're making a fool of themselves. So, or whatever. Let them be. They have to be who they are and suffer those consequences. You don't have to be damaged by them, and you don't have to take action. Or maybe you don't have to know where your line is and say, nope. Yes.
I love this, and that last thing just reminded me of Rosa Parks. I will no longer be complicit in my own oppression. But the other thing that though all the work, all of this internal work is so important, but my question is, how does getting healthy warrior happen in community? Like, I think about the kind of negative side is just swapping somebody else's manipulative bag of tricks for my bag of tricks.
Okay.
But that aside, being around healthy people, and I just think of Suzanne Molnar, that what a healthy 8 is like.
Yeah.
That is aggressive and has boundaries and isn't afraid of backing down, and just being in community with people who have a different approach and have a healthy warrior. And
Having that modeled.
having that modeled, but also the sum of the parts is greater than the whole in terms of systemic change. Like you mentioned the Me Too thing, and anyway, I want to kick around what it looks like in community.
Kathy? I'm like, I don't know. I pretty much dropped out of community because it was so freaking messy.
I kind of think, I mean, I don't know all the way, but I kind of think it's when we're calling it out in each other. So that's a piece, and people are having healthy conflict and bringing their, like, this is, you know, this would help me, or this was hard for me, but not that crazy thing that I've seen in community. And it's fine in healing community. A lot of times when people are learning their boundaries for the first time, they go way over to this side, and then, oh my gosh, every little thing is a trigger and all that. But I think part of healthy warrior and community is just living with that as part of it. You know, kind of like accepting that that's we're all humans and we have to find our way. But I think the best that I've seen is, that's why I'm in community with little pockets of people out in the refuge. It's like having people help me move somewhere, and like hearing their stories. I feel like that's a big piece.
Warrior space.
That's warrior. And then I think in the bigger world, I mean, I was thinking of Pam Wilhelm's living system stuff. And so in a healthy system, see, if you have everybody like kind of limp, you know, not willing to show up, like a healthy garden or a healthy system has strength and resilience. So that's what'll make it grow. And so if you do have everybody like not willing to kind of have an opinion, or, you know, always like it won't, you need that like strength and resilience and growth and push and discomfort in order to get to a new place. But then the discomfort is really hard, and that's why everyone makes community.
Well, I think that good communication models are important. So nonviolent communication or confrontation models where you're owning stuff, and as a community you're sort of like all privy to the same information, and then your value is to try to do that straight and with integrity. Then you open up the opportunity for people to work out their issues together. And then so it can be facilitated, or you can...
Yeah, and that's really only where it's going to happen, because it has to happen
Yeah,
in community.
it's true.
Or it's not going to happen. But a safer community, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it sets a container to practice.
Yeah,
I think a braver community is a better word than safer.
braver, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need part 2.
Yeah, maybe so. And we're done, so I'm just going to